So you have to fight them and show that was a one-time thing. That was a bonus that I will never get again. That was a deal I closed that I will never get again. And it should be thrown out as an outlier.
Yeah. All right, so we'll move on to our last topic here, and this is an interesting one. All right, so the story goes, a Utah mom is accused of kidnapping her 5-year-old daughter over a year in the middle of a divorce and taking them off the grid to a cult that touts Bitcoin as the cure for over-controlling government. Kimberly Dell Davidson Drollist spent 14 months planning the disturbing January 2023 abduction of her daughter, ripping her from her Utah home and bringing her to a cult compound in Missouri led by Paul Dean. Wow. A lot going on there. And I've actually had a case that kind of tracks along this. I normally say you should never use the word kidnapping if one parent keeps the child longer. Like, that's not kidnapping. They're not following the court order. Your child was not kidnapped. You don't call the police and say, my child's been kidnapped. But in this situation, I would. The case I had, it involved a child was born here in California, in the Inland Empire, and mom had, in the middle of the night, upped and left with the daughter and moved to rural Arizona on an Indian reservation and actually had a fifth wheel that it was just a bunch of people with RVs, fifth wheels, just doing drugs out on the Indian reservation, this little compound. And she actually brought the child back to see dad, and she went to go do whatever. Dad didn't let her back in the house, and she lost her mind. But dad hadn't seen the kid in like 45 days. She just disappeared. So normally I'm like, you do not use the kidnapping word. But I think this is one of those few cases where it's like, this legitimately, they were kidnapped and brought to a space where law enforcement couldn't get to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a difference between staying an extra day on vacation, right? Or doing a couple things, maybe taking the kids out of state. They say that they're not going out of state, but they go out of state. Yeah. And yes, it's a violation of a custody order. And that's a key too. Is there a custody order or isn't there a custody order? Yeah. Because if you're both the parents, it's hard to kidnap. To me, it's the intent to permanently deprive the other person of contact with the child.
This is 14 months. You went and lived in a cult compound for 14 months.
That's kidnapping.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and so what do we do when there's kidnapping, right? Well, if you've got a custody order that you can enforce, you go to the child abduction district attorney's office in your county and you file with them. They will now start the process. They'll try to help locate the child. If you already know where the child is, even better. And then they will initiate proceedings with the local authorities in the other state. If it's another country, far more difficult. We're not going to get into that today.
Convention,
yeah, it's Hague Convention.
It's a whole other episode.
That is an entire, and I have a humdinger for one for that. But I've had one where the children were being kept from opposing side. There was a restraining order, but she wasn't even following the basic custody. I was able to, once the restraining order went, I got a default judgment. I served her. She didn't respond, getting them every other weekend, and then she took off. And we couldn't find her. So we filed with a child abduction. She ended up being found in Las Vegas. The DA told her to come back. She refused to come back. And so the day before Thanksgiving, they called me up and said, hey, have your client out at this address. We're going to go arrest her. They kicked down her door. They arrested her. He took the children back. She spent quite a while in jail. And he ended up getting sole legal and sole physical custody. Now, it went on far beyond that for years after that.
I can imagine.
Because he wasn't an angel either. But that's how you get him back, right? Is you sometimes they're going to require that you get an order from the family court, so you might have to file a parentage action. If you can't prove you're a father, if you weren't already married, you're going to need to get a petition to establish parental rights. Yeah. And you're going to need to get some kind of judgment in there. Which is hard, right? Because how am I going to get service? Well, you're going to have to publish. We could go into the weeds on that. But you need, for the DA, you're going to need something to get them to enforce that order. Yeah. You're not going to go try to find them and counter-kidnap them. This is not a movie. right?
Yeah.
Don't do that.
All right. Well, that one's a little bit more of a wild, probably not necessarily as practical. I think the rule of thumb is that is kidnapping. Most of what you claim is kidnapping is actually not kidnapping. It's you and the other parent not agreeing.
Correct. And that's called, we enforce it by contempt, or you bring it up to the court. But again, it's not necessarily kidnapping. It might be a violation. It might be a criminal. Maybe the DA picks it up as a criminal act, but it's not a felony. It's a misdemeanor.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, Ryan, thank you so much for your time, your insight today. I hope all our listeners and viewers enjoyed this episode of the Fathers Rights Playbook, and we'll see you guys all again next week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.